My son's fingers lingered on my wife's wrist for just a second too long. We were all sitting at the dinner table on an ordinary Tuesday. I am 48 years old and I work as an architect. My life is supposed to be about solid plans and predictable outcomes. My wife Chloe is the best thing that has happened to me. My son Leo, home from college, always seemed to adore her. I thought we had built something perfect and stable together. Chloe was just reaching for the salt when her sleeve fell back. Leo reached out and smoothly pulled the fabric back into place. It was a gesture that could have meant absolutely nothing at all, but the way he looked at her felt heavy and possessive. The way her smile faltered was almost imperceptible to anyone else. I saw it clearly, and a cold dread started to settle in my gut. They both acted like the moment never even happened. The conversation about her day at the bookstore just picked up again, yet the air in the room had changed completely. A tense silence now existed underneath all of our polite words. I kept replaying that small, simple movement over in my head. His hand on her arm felt like a violation. I told myself that I was being jealous and completely irrational. He is just a kid and she is his stepmother, but the image was burned into my memory for the rest of the night. Later, I watched him walk down the hallway toward his room. He stopped outside our closed bedroom door for a noticeable moment. The next morning, I tried to pretend that nothing was wrong. I made coffee and talked about the weather with a forced cheerfulness. Chloe seemed a little quiet, but was otherwise acting completely normal. Leo came downstairs and barely even looked in my direction. I told myself I was a fool for letting my imagination run wild. For 2 years, this house had been a place of genuine happiness. When I first introduced Leo to Chloe, he had been so welcoming. He said it was great to see me so happy with someone. They developed a friendship that felt easy and natural to me. I thought it was a sign of a healthy, blending family dynamic. Now I remember all the little things I chose to ignore before. There were the times Leo would take her side in silly arguments. He would defend her choice of movie or restaurant with unusual passion. He started buying her small gifts, like a specific brand of tea. He claimed he just remembered her mentioning it once in passing. There was also his constant eagerness to help her with errands. He always volunteered for a trip to the grocery store with her. I used to see it as him being a helpful, considerate son. Now it feels like he was creating opportunities to be alone with her. I have been pushing these reframe memories out of my head all week. I focused on my architectural drawings and the logic of my work, but the doubt keeps creeping back in when I least expect it. The foundation of my perfect little world now has a crack in it. It is a fracture so small you could almost miss it, but I know that it is there and I feel it growing. I decided to leave work early on Friday to surprise Chloe. The week had been suffocatingly tense and I wanted to fix it. I thought maybe a nice dinner out could reset the atmosphere. I wanted to believe that fresh air could heal the fracture. I walked into the house and was met with an unnerving silence. Usually there was music playing or the television was on, but today the entire first floor was still and quiet. I called out for Chloe, but there was no answer from her. I called for Leo and again was only met with silence. A familiar knot of anxiety tightened deep inside my stomach. I walked through the kitchen and into the main living room. That is where I finally found the two of them together. The curtains were drawn, leaving the room in a dim afternoon haze. Soft, atmospheric music was playing from a small speaker on the floor. Chloe and Leo were sitting on the sofa much closer than necessary. He was leaning in and speaking to her in a low voice. She was listening intently with her head tilted down toward him. They did not notice me standing in the doorway at first. I had to clear my throat loudly to announce my presence. Chloe jumped, her eyes widening with a look of pure shock. Leo, however, turned his head slowly with a defiant calmness. He did not seem surprised or guilty, which was far more disturbing. Chloe immediately stood up and started smoothing down her clothes. She explained they were just looking at old photo albums together, but her voice was thin and her hands were visibly shaking. Leo remained on the sofa, watching me with a challenging stare. He did not say a word to support her flimsy explanation. The entire scene felt staged and deeply, fundamentally wrong. My carefully constructed illusion of a happy family completely shattered. I was not looking at a stepmother and her stepson anymore. I was looking at two conspirators caught in the act. The trust I had in both of them evaporated in an instant. I felt like a stranger who had walked into the wrong house. I waited until Leo had gone out later that evening. I found Chloe in the kitchen wiping down a perfectly clean counter. I tried to talk to her about what I had seen earlier. My tone was calm because I genuinely wanted to understand the situation. I asked her to please be honest with me about her relationship. Her reaction was immediate and intensely defensive in its nature. She accused me of having a disgusting and suspicious mind. She said that she had only ever tried to be a good mother. She claimed my jealousy was poisoning our beautiful family life. Every question I asked was turned back on me as a personal failing. She suggested my stress from work was making me paranoid. I was inventing problems where only innocence and love existed. By the end, I was the one who was apologizing to her. I felt a profound sense of guilt for hurting her feelings. The next day, I attempted to have a talk with Leo. He just laughed at me when I brought up the incident. He said Chloe was like a cool older sister to him. He made me feel like an ancient, clueless old man. He asked if I had a problem with them being friends. The question was a clear and very deliberate trap. His tone was light, but his eyes were cold and challenging. After that, a new and terrible silence filled up the house. They were both polite and distant with me from that moment on. They would talk to each other, but the conversation would stop. The moment I walked into a room, everything would go quiet. I felt like I was the one who had committed some great crime. Their united front was designed to make me feel completely isolated. I started to seriously doubt my own perceptions and memories. Maybe I really did misread the whole situation so badly. Perhaps my mind was the problem, not their strange actions. I spent the next 2 weeks living in a fog of denial. I actively tried to believe the story they had sold me. I went to work and came home and made polite conversation. I ignored the lingering tension that clung to every room. I wanted to be the reasonable man who trusted his family, but the truth has a way of finding you when you hide. I was looking for a specific textbook in Leo's bedroom. He had borrowed it from me for a class last semester. While searching his closet, I found a small, elegant gift bag. It was tucked away behind a stack of old shoe boxes. Inside was a bottle of expensive perfume I recognized immediately. It was the one Chloe always pointed out in department stores. She loved the scent, but always said it was too extravagant. A gift receipt was still inside the bag with the perfume. The purchase was made with Leo's debit card last month. A few days later, Chloe came downstairs for dinner. She was wearing that exact same intoxicating floral scent. I complimented her on it and casually asked when she got it. She smiled and said she decided to spoil herself last week. The lie was so easy and fluid that it chilled me. I knew for certain that she was not telling the truth. The evidence was irrefutable, and I could no longer doubt myself. Later that week, I overheard him on the phone in his room. The door was closed, but his voice was angry and intense. I only caught a few distinct phrases through the wood. He said that he was tired of waiting for the right time. He said the other person was being weak and a coward. He ended the call by saying he would not be ignored. I was now absolutely certain that something was deeply wrong. I had concrete proof, but I did not know what to do. Living with the knowledge felt worse than the initial suspicion. The constant pretense was eating away at my soul every day. I knew that I could not confront them with what I had. They would just create more elaborate lies to confuse me. I needed something that they could not possibly deny or escape. The decision I made felt like a betrayal of my own values. I ordered a small security camera that looked like a phone charger. Installing it in the living room made me feel sick with shame. I had become a spy inside of my own comfortable home. I told myself it was the only way to get the real truth. I left for work the next day with a heavy feeling of dread. I checked the live feed on my phone almost every single hour. For most of the day, the house was completely empty. Then they both arrived home at nearly the same time. I watched them on my phone from the solitude of my office. They began talking, and their conversation quickly became an argument. I could not hear their words, but I could see the anger. Leo was agitated, pacing back and forth in front of her. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, looking increasingly distressed. Then he moved toward her and grabbed her by the arm. It was not a violent gesture, but it was controlling. She immediately recoiled and pulled her arm away from him. The look on her face was one of genuine, unmistakable fear. That single image on my screen was the definitive turning point. This was not a secret love affair or a simple flirtation. This was something much darker and far more coercive. My denial was replaced with an ice-cold sense of clarity. I finally saw the truth, and it was much worse than I imagined. I did not call them before I started driving home. I walked back into the house less than an hour later. The atmosphere was still thick with their unspoken conflict. I asked both of them to come into the living room. I told them that we all needed to have a conversation. My voice was calm and steady, which seemed to unnerve them both. I sat down in the armchair across from the main sofa. I placed my phone on the coffee table between us. Then I played the video clip from the security camera. The short, silent film unfolded in the quiet of the room. We all watched the moment where he grabbed her arm. We all saw the genuine fear that flashed across her face. When the clip ended, nobody spoke for a very long time. Chloe was the first one to finally break the silence. She began to cry, not loudly, but with deep, ragged sobs. She confessed that Leo had been making advances for months. She said she did not know how to tell me the truth. She was terrified of breaking apart our happy family. Leo, however, just sat there with a look of cold fury. He did not deny what everyone had just seen on screen. Instead, he directed all of his anger directly at me. He told me that I was too old and boring for her. He said that I could never make her truly happy. It was a shocking and unbelievably cruel display of defiance. My son had been replaced by this cold and hateful stranger. The entire foundation of my world crumbled in that moment. The family I had worked so hard to build was a lie. We were just three broken people in a silent, empty room. Something inside of me turned cold in that quiet room. The part of me that wanted peace and understanding simply died. My son's hateful words had erased any remaining fatherly affection. I looked at him and saw only a threat to my life. I knew that I had to act immediately to regain control. I told him to go upstairs and pack a bag. My voice was completely devoid of any real emotion. He stared at me with shock, which then turned into rage. He started to yell, but I did not raise my voice. I informed him that he was no longer welcome in my house. Chloe started to plead with me, asking me to stop. I told her to remain silent and stay out of this. This was no longer a family dispute that could be resolved. It was a necessary and deliberate act of removal. I then told Leo that he was completely cut off. His college tuition would no longer be paid by me. The money in his savings account would be frozen tomorrow. I was systematically dismantling the life he had always known. It was a cold and a morally questionable series of actions. But I did not feel any remorse for what I was doing. I was taking back the power that he had stolen from me. He stood there, sputtering, with a look of pure hatred. Then he turned and stormed up the stairs to his bedroom. I heard drawers slamming and doors banging for 10 minutes. He came back down with a single duffel bag in his hand. He walked past us and out the front door without another word. I did not feel sadness as I watched my only son leave. I only felt a vast and chilling emptiness inside of me. The house remained a mausoleum of unspoken grief and fear. Chloe existed in a state of permanent fragile quiet. I had severed the limb to save the body, but the phantom pain was constant. The next attack was not aimed at my mind, but at my finances. I received a fraud alert from my bank about a large withdrawal. I checked the account and a cold dread washed over me. A joint savings account I shared with Leo was completely empty. It was money I had set aside for his future. Because his name was on it, the action was perfectly legal. It was a calculated act of financial and emotional betrayal. I called him immediately, my voice shaking with a contained rage. He answered the phone on the second ring, sounding calm. He did not deny taking the thousands of dollars from me. He told me he was simply taking what he was owed. Then he delivered the blow that was meant to destroy me. He calmly informed me he had already hired a lawyer. He said he would use the money to free Chloe from me. He threatened to file a police report with false abuse allegations. He was going to paint me as a violent and controlling monster. My son was threatening to systematically ruin my entire life. This was a level of cruelty I could never have imagined. The conflict had moved beyond our family and into the real world. I was no longer fighting for my marriage, but for my freedom. His threat solidified my resolve into something as hard as diamond. There was no room left for hesitation or for moral debate. My son had decided to try and burn my entire world down. I simply decided I would have to burn his world first. I did not bother trying to call him back to argue. I did not waste my time consulting with my own lawyer. I drove down to the local police precinct that afternoon. I calmly filed a formal report against my own son for extortion. I provided the exact details of his financial demands. I explained his explicit threat to file a false police report. The officer listened to me with a tired and professional expression. When I returned home, I went straight into my home office. I uploaded the video file from the discreet security camera. I drafted a short and completely factual email explaining everything. It detailed the inappropriate behavior and the escalating threats. I attached the video of him grabbing Chloe's arm. Then I sent this email to our entire extended family, my parents, my brother, his cousins, and all of our aunts. Every single person who could ever offer him sanctuary or support. I pressed the send button without a single shred of regret. I was not trying to save my family or to find peace. I was performing a cold and necessary act of amputation. I had to destroy him completely in order to survive. The war was finally over because I had deployed a final weapon. The war ended, but no peace ever arrived in its place. The silence my final action purchased is a permanent and heavy thing. Now I notice all the small sounds inside the house. The low hum of the refrigerator is a constant companion. The floorboards creak under my feet with startling clarity. These are the only noises that are left in my home. I never heard from my family again after I sent the email. There were no recriminations, and there was no forgiveness offered. My name was simply erased from the family's long history. Last month, I saw my own brother in the grocery store. He made eye contact with me for a brief second. Then he turned his shopping cart and quickly walked away. I am completely alone now, even when I am in public. Chloe still drifts through these rooms like a beautiful, sad ghost. We share a space, but we do not share a life. We are two strangers tied together by a shared trauma. Sometimes I see a flicker of the woman I first loved, but then her eyes become vacant again, and she disappears. We eat our meals in a carefully maintained, perfect silence. The void my son left behind has no emotional weight. He is simply a fact from a past I no longer access. My victory was the complete and total annihilation of my world. I sit in this house that I built with my own two hands. It is a monument to order, control, and absolute emptiness. I have the quiet life that I was so desperate to protect. There is just no life left in it anymore. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your reaction helps me create new stories.